Welcome to Small Biz Life, episode 47. Trolls, haters, and critics.
Oh my. Does this sound familiar?
Oh my God, I have so much to do today.
Don't forget to breathe.
But I have almost 400 emails in my inbox and 30 phone calls to make.
Have you looked into getting a virtual assistant yet?
Oh, and I need to schedule all my social media posts.
Did you drink anything today?
I had coffee.
Did you eat today?
Did I mention coffee's a bean?
This is Small Biz Life.
Welcome to this week's episode of Small Biz Life. If you are a returning listener, thanks so much for joining us again. And if you're a new listener, thanks so much for checking us out. We appreciate it.
Yes, we do.
My name is Kristen Ingram.
And I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
I am a CPA.
And I am an IT analyst.
Ooh. And we are husband and wife small business owners who are walking through this journey with you through what we call the small biz life.
We like to share our trials and tribulations with other people to help make sure that less small businesses fail.
Absolutely. Because we know that this isn't a 9-to-5 job. This is something that you are working on 24 hours a day, that sometimes those ideas or those worries hit you at 3 o'clock in the morning and wake you up out of bed.
The word life was not chosen by accident.
Yeah, that was pretty intentional. Because I think that's how we feel about our businesses, that it really is. It's a lifestyle.
Yes, it is. And it affects your family and loved ones. So I'm very excited about this topic. I love talking about criticism.
Okay, well, that's...
Yeah, quite a segue. I know.
Yeah, this is not my favorite topic in the whole world. Because the thing that you're going to find is the more risks that you take and the more you put yourself out there, the more you are going to attract criticism.
Mm-hmm. You know, whether it be blanket criticism like, oh, someone else trying to make money off of people, which would be really shocking. But, you know, there's a lot of criticisms that can come at us from many different corridors. And we just want to go through the criticisms and sit there and say, is there a way we can logically go through this, get anything possible out of it, to make it improve our business and the products that we deliver to people?
Yeah, because a lot of it is just assessing validity.
Yeah.
So we're going to start by talking about the different types of critics that you'll find online. And I don't even know the first two. I don't even think I'd really call them critics, but...
Well, they are. I mean, they feel like it when you're being hit by them. And the first one are... And there really two are trolls. And I break them up into what I call classic trolls and haters.
Oh, okay.
Boo. Boo on both.
So what's a troll?
So sort of in a classical sense, trolls were people who would go around the internet and really try and start trouble. They would be a naysayer to whatever you said. It could be potty humor. It could be anything to get a rise out of the people they're talking to.
Right. And so... typically, trolls are people that they don't care about you. They don't care about your business. They just go around the internet trying to piss people off.
Yep. And they're quite good at it. And you might see them all of the time. And sometimes we'll confuse other types of critics for being trolls because I think there's a tendency to think trolls are just being nasty, which they typically are. However, it's really an intentionality thing where they don't really even care necessarily what you're doing. They might or might not even be against what you're saying. They just want to start trouble because that's what they're looking for.
Yeah, there are some people on the internet that get a rise out of that. Mm-hmm. And so they literally just go around and like they comment on people's Facebook ads.
Yep.
You know, trying to get a rise out of people.
Yes.
Those people are sad.
Yeah. I guess what makes the world go around, huh?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what is a hater? How is that different from a troll?
A hater to me is someone who doesn't necessarily go around the internet doing this, but for some reason you strike a bad nerve with them. And it could be for a variety of reasons. However, it's like you feel like wherever you show up, they show up and they have negative things to say.
Yeah, these are people that have somehow become personally invested
Yeah.
in driving you crazy or
Yes.
tearing you down.
They might or might not even know they're doing it. I would assume they do. However, the intention here is they feel like they're targeting you at least. It's like wherever you go, it's a negative comment, and it could you might think they're a troll because it might just be just really wrong, inappropriate type of stuff. Or there might even be some near valid criticisms that they're giving you. However, no matter what you do, no matter what you say, no matter how much you improve your product, you can't please a hater.
Right. Exactly. So I think these two, you really have to look to say whether or not they're valid. Trolls are just trying to get a rise out of you.
No.
And typically haters, like Jeff said, there's nothing that you can do that's going to make them happy.
You know, if you're trying to provide a product or service to more than one person, you cannot please the target audience all the time. And some people will sometimes not like what you do, and other people will never like what you do. Like I said, it doesn't even really matter why. The simple fact is, focus on the successes in these scenarios. Ignore the haters and trolls.
Yeah. Okay, so who else is in our circle of folks that we need to start thinking about when we think of criticism?
Friends and family.
Ah, yes, because they love you.
Yes, and they're telling you this for your own good. And they might have some reasonable experience in the world of business and maybe even a small business, but they do not understand you. They do not understand. And this is a type of them I'm saying here. There might be some that do, but when you have a problem with the friends and family, a less valid version of the kinds that do not understand you. They don't understand what you stand for. They don't understand what you're trying to achieve. They don't understand even who you're trying to get to. They're just trying to help you. And it might drive you crazy because you actually care about these people.
Yeah, and if you listen to episode 46, where we talked about why people and why not people, this is where you have the opportunity to determine what you share with them.
Yeah.
And I know like sometimes that's hard, you know, when you're on social media and you're using part of your personal page to share, you know, business stuff. That happens to all of us.
Yep.
But when you're one-on-one with them or you're in groups with your family, you don't have to share if they're not going to be constructive.
Or, you know, they may maybe even respond to your email newsletters that you bullied them into joining so you could have larger numbers. But, you know, I mean, they're there because they love you and appreciate them for their intention. And we'll kind of get into going through the criticisms, but very early on, you have to understand where are they coming from, you know, and is it going to help make your business better?
Right. And a lot of times, friends and family, especially if you don't have a lot of entrepreneurs in your family, they don't get what we do.
Yes. Someone who works even very successfully in a classic 9-to-5 corporate setting does not understand your perspective, your audience, or your ability to be agile in certain circumstances. You can't be overwhelmed even with their thoughts. There might be some takeaways that you can take advantage of, but don't get overwhelmed even if they've been successful in their life. If they've not done it through being an entrepreneur, it's a different kind of lifestyle.
Yep. Okay, who's next?
Customers.
Okay.
Oh, that could be a scary one, having a customer tell you that they have a problem with a product or service. This is one, when we get into the validity of them, you have to really think about, because if a customer is taking the time to let you know, it's probably something worth knowing. And it might not even be something directly within your control. For example, you know, if they bought a book of yours and it got all messed up in shipping, that's not directly your fault unless you packaged it yourself incorrectly, which usually people don't in today's age. But it's still valid criticism to the services that you're delivering to them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one I think you have to take probably the most serious. And don't get me wrong, and we'll get into this into the validity of evaluating criticism, but customers, you have to treat them like they're right all the time, but sometimes they're wrong.
Yeah, and you know, the longer that I've owned my business, it's not true that the customer is always right. I'm sorry, it's just not. And there have been times in my business where I have disengaged with clients because I did not like something they were doing.
Yes, we have both done client firings. At least I fired a client outright years ago. And there's no point to get into why, but they were wrong. And I would not ethically put myself into a position to do that kind of stuff.
Right. And that's typically where my line is that if I think it's something that's unethical or the person's like clearly breaking the law and they don't want to do the right thing, but there's this mantra that the customer's always right. And I'm sorry, that's not true.
And a lot of times you have to deal with it, even if their perception's wrong. You have to deal with it as if they're right. You can't just be like, hey, stupid, do what we tell you to. That wouldn't work. But you have to know your customers and you have to deal with it, especially when they're wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And now the next one is probably, I think, the most devastating for us, even maybe more so than friends and family. But this could be a toss-up depending on the person. The last type of critics I want to talk about are peers. And when I say peers, it's people who are in the same kind of space that we're in. They might be thought leaders and even more advanced than us, but they cover kind of the same topics. They deliver their product in the same kinds of ways that you do. Those are your peers. And these can be devastating because you think that, you have respect for this person because they're getting it done. And they're just telling you that you're not getting it done in at least a way.
Right. And I think you have to be really careful with peers because you have to look at what their motivation is. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes peers will tear you down so that you don't compete with them.
Yes.
And, I've seen a lot of times where you'll actually see employees of a company go into somebody else's Facebook group or page and tear it apart in order to help, possibly build the brand that they work for.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's one of the very valid risks of listening to peers, or possibly they maybe really buy into the exact methodology they deliver and think that their one way can help all people in the sphere. And that's almost never true. I would argue that it's one of those things that is probably never true. And you have to prove to me that there's someone who has a product that will service everyone.
Yeah. And that's why, we always encourage you guys that even if there are people that are in that space that you want to be in, that your voice is different, your approach to things is different. And so you can't just look at all of the people in your space and say, well, I don't need to be here because somebody else has already done it. Mm-hmm. And, I think one thing that's really important to note, and I think we have to look at ourselves sometimes. A lot of times your haters and your peer critics will come out because they wish they were where you are.
And let's be honest, the major problem with dealing with criticism is not what you're being told. It's the fear voices in our head are being reinforced by an outside influence.
Well, and I think, and this has happened to me because we have so many ideas and you can only go after, certain ones. There are going to be times that you have a really good idea and you don't have the time to flesh it out or you don't flesh it out and somebody else beat you to it.
Yep.
Because I think we both kind of live in the camp that there aren't a lot of new ideas.
Yeah.
There are a lot of recycled ideas. And especially when you're trying to put out content like every week or multiple times a week, we're all going to be talking about the same stuff if we're in the same space.
Because, especially when you're in the same space, because, usually you're trying to answer the questions and solve similar problems, maybe from a different perspective. There's nuanced differences, but the simple fact is, if you're dealing with customer A types, then customer A types have similar traits. They have similar personalities, maybe. There's similar types of issues you're dealing with your business to your customer.
But and I want you to think about like when you start looking at somebody's product or service and you feel yourself kind of going in that direction of, well, who are they to do this? Why is it them? Well, because they did it before you did.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of want you to think about like, do you need to check your jealousy? And do you need to look at why you didn't bring this to market first?
And don't let a fear that you have stop you because someone else says something that's similar. They might be completely invalid. Your initial fear, you'd probably come up with why it's invalid already, but it becomes fresh in your brain. So don't get trapped into this, oh, wait, I am that, and I had said it was invalid, but I must be wrong because person X just told me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I think that when you're going through the kind of the valuation stage, and even when you're, on Facebook, it's really easy to just kind of not think, right? And speak. And that's where a lot of the stuff comes from. You have to say, is this valid?
Yeah.
And on both sides. So am I making a valid criticism, or am I just pissed off because I wanted to do this first and now everybody thinks it's great? Yeah. Because it happens. It does.
It does. Yeah. And it's very important. So I do think it's very important to go over, how we validate our criticism to find out, one, how relevant it is, and two, what kind of risk are we at for not listening? Because sometimes, even if it's a valid criticism, it might not be something that you can address right away. And maybe that's okay. But you keep in your mind for, the second edition or the next time you roll out the same ideas. Your life doesn't have to be perfect. And, how many quotes, I don't have my computer open right now, but there are lots of quotes about how the enemy of getting things done is perfection. Perfection is an obstacle that is trying to stop you from accomplishing. And critics feed into this fear in our brains. Do not let it.
Well, and let me just, I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. So we spoke at Launch Out in St. Louis last weekend, and we set up we have this like lead page, right? This whole page. And we told people like, go up, go to this page, sign up for, these free resources we're going to give you. And it's only for the people that are at the conference. And we were so proud of ourselves. Like, we set this all up and it worked and it was great. And, and I get an email like 2 days later, like, hi, I signed up for the thing, but I didn't get it.
Thank you for the email.
And I said, okay, all right. And I know this person. She's in our group. I've known her for a couple of years now. And I said, all right. So I go through and we found out that like it wasn't working right. If you were already a subscriber on our list, you didn't get the thing. And wow, that was so frustrating.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, well, we did this and we tested it, but I tested it with a new email. I didn't test it with an email that's already on the list. Yep. And it was frustrating and it was embarrassing. And
it caused a lot of extra work to get that out to people who asked for it.
Mm-hmm. But it happens.
Yeah.
We all run into issues, whether they're our own issues because we mess something up or maybe a vendor messes something up and we have to deal with the ramifications. Mm-hmm. It's normal in business. It's not going to run perfectly no matter how many times we check it, no matter how many times we test it. Mm-hmm. Things are bound to go wrong.
Yep.
But that shouldn't stop you from moving forward.
That's right. And just keep this in mind. There are companies who make a living testing products, possibly new software, all kinds of things they test products for. And still when products go to market, they have flaws because there's a point at which it's good enough to start using. And that's the point at which you need to start using it. You got to get into that mindset because all this criticism will just feed your fears and it will stop you in your tracks. Don't be stopped.
Okay, so let's talk about validity.
Yeah.
So in my mind, like trolls and haters, I give them very little validity, if any.
It depends on how thick your skin is. If you have thin skin, give them no validity and listen to none of it. And sometimes you maybe have to do that because if you can't handle the criticism, which some people can't, and it's just a personality thing. If you can handle it, read through it, maybe you get ideas on how to improve your business from listening to trolls and haters. But largely, it's not worth it.
Well, I mean, the thing is, the reason that I say don't give them any validity is because nothing that you do is going to make them happy. They're not doing it to try to improve your process. They're doing it because they don't like you and they want to tear you down.
Yeah. Or trolls, one thing that you can do to make them happy is to be upset.
Right.
So if you ignore them, they go away.
Mm-hmm.
Haters, what's that song say? Haters gonna hate?
Yeah. And I mean, typically what I do with haters is I don't address trolls, but I do address haters.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that my community, and I see this more like in the accounting and focus side of things than I do in the small biz life side. I have people that leave like nasty comments on how my videos are too long or how my handwriting sucks or and when I think it's a hater, I respond to them. And I'm usually like sickeningly sweet when I do it.
Yeah. And it's very tricky here if you choose to make these kind of responses to people. Don't be afraid not to, but make sure that if they refute your response, which is natural for this, that's the natural way things evolve on the internet. You respond and try and disprove them, and then they respond to disprove you. Make your response in a way that it does not, if they do that, it makes themselves look silly.
Yeah, I mean, and typically what I find with YouTube is that if it's a troll, they will keep pushing your buttons. If it's a hater, they're going to post their one nasty comment and then they don't come back. But I think that you need to address those. You know, I had somebody on one of my videos, and this is like my most popular video on YouTube, and it's got hundreds of comments. That was like, your video's too long, and you drag it out, and you keep going over it, and it's terrible.
Yeah.
And I responded back. And I said, well, thank you so much for your comment. And I am really impressed that you got this topic so quickly, because I know from the hundreds of comments I've received that a lot of people really struggle with this topic. But good for you for getting it so quickly. Things like that, you shut them down, right? Because I do have hundreds of comments talking about how great that video is.
Yes. Now, the thing to keep in mind is you're not going to be able to shut all of them down, even when you're right. And it might not be in your personality to engage people who are just being haters or just trolling you. You don't necessarily need to. However, it's important to keep in mind that, especially like if it's off of an ad that you're running, make sure to keep the last thing in the thread positive. You know, so even if you don't address them directly, just be like, I want to thank everyone for all of the wonderful feedback I've received through this thread so far. I can't wait to get more. Leave something with a positive note in it.
Yeah, I think that's really important, especially when you're running ads. And I think like I want to show my community that it's okay for them to leave, you know, negative feedback as long as it's constructive.
Yeah.
And that I don't believe in deleting, you know, bad comments or bad reviews unless there is something like vile about it.
Oh, yeah, they're attacking someone else in the thread. They're personally attacking you or your family. And there's nothing to do with the part. Those things are fine. Now, we often talk about avatars in the sense of marketing. You know, you need that person that you're targeting in your marketing. Criticism is the other really important reason to know your avatar. You can have a discussion with your avatar. Like mine are actually dialogue that go through my head because I'm a bit crazy. But other people, it might be a little bit more rational the way you do it. But you have to take, whether it's from a peer, a customer, friends, and family, these other types of trolls, the first thing you have to run through your mind is, does their criticism speak to what's going to help my avatar? And you're going to have customers who aren't your exact avatar and some who might even be very far away from that. But the point of having an avatar is it allows you to address personally certain types of people in your advertising. When you know that for your product or your service, who the avatar is, not only does it help you market it to them, but later on when you actually get criticism, you can run it through a filter to see if I make the change requested, will it benefit my avatar?
Right. And, the other thing too is that when you're looking at criticism that people are giving you, typically if it comes from my avatar, I consider it more seriously than if it's a peer or a friend, because my avatar is my target, right? And if they don't understand something that I'm selling or they don't get the messaging, then I need to change it.
And one thing, especially if you're into content delivery, you really need to understand when you're talking to your avatar, because if your avatar tells you that they don't understand something in your marketing or in your latest blog article or your latest podcast, that's serious. And you need to have a thick skin for that, because sometimes things are going to happen. But those are the types of things that I would put much higher on my priority list to fix than even a decent suggestion from a friend or a peer.
Right. I think that's super important, is to just, when you're thinking about how valid something is, look at who's telling you this.
Yeah.
Avatar's number one for me. Other small business owners, especially if they're not a direct peer, and it depends on what space they're in. Like YouTubers are pretty cool. Podcasters are pretty cool. Yeah. Other CPAs and other business advisors tend to be very competitive.
Yes.
Financial bloggers are very competitive.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of depends on who your peer group is and how they support each other. If they are very supportive, then I'll take that more seriously than in a space where they're not.
And then again, though, I only take it seriously to the point of, does it serve my avatar? Number one. And then number two, will it help me make more money? That's really the two things, right? First for me, it's servicing the people I'm working with. And then second, it's actually being compensated. Now, you don't get compensated for everything, and that's fine. But ultimately, those are the two major criticisms that catch my attention the first. And then, I will act on them when available with time. And that's based on risk. Risk is a huge part of this. If it's something like, oh, wait, you used the wrong where in the first sentence of your copy, well, it takes, 15 seconds to fix, and there's a high risk I'll look stupid. So I can go make that pretty easily. Now, if they think the entire argument is structured wrong and it would take me a couple hours to rewrite an article to take its place, if I agree with them, I might not act on it as instantaneously because there's more time. So there's a risk to reward that you have to put in there.
Right. And that's why, typically if you're running ads, you want to run like multiple ads and see which ones perform better. Mm-hmm. I see a lot of times where, people they'll run an ad campaign and they'll get clicks and they're really happy that they got the clicks, but then it's not converting, and you've got to kind of look at that and say, what part in the process do people disengage?
Yeah.
That is the piece that you need to work on.
And I think the tendency is to drop the price to get it to sell. And that might have the complete adverse response, because they might then go, wait, why is the price crashing on this thing that was $300 and now it's $250, now it's $150, now it's $100. Mm-hmm. And you might kill off a product by doing that. And usually it's something in the copy. And a lot of times for a lot of people I know, it's usually burying the call to action, where you don't want to say, could you please buy this?
Right. Right. So I think that we disagree a little bit on how you respond, or if you should respond.
Well, I don't know if there's really an agreement or disagreement possible. It's one of those things where it's about the circumstances around there. But yeah.
Yeah. I just want you to think that any brand out there does not make everybody happy.
No.
There are people that don't like Tide, even though Tide is a brand that most people really like. There are people who don't like coffee, and they're insane. But, there are people who don't like coffee. So, that you're successful if there are people who don't like you.
Yeah. I mean, the first way to take criticism is congratulations, you've been noticed. And that really is huge. That means not only have you taken the massive risk of throwing yourself out into the internet of ideas, but you've also been noticed in it.
Right. Because I think if you are only surrounded by people who love you and think you're amazing, then you're not trying hard enough. You're not putting yourself out there and exposing yourself to more people.
And no matter how much time and effort you put into it, there should always be takeaways on how to do it better next time. Can I save more money? Can I maybe lower my cost? There are different things that you can change every time you're out there. So take in the information, don't panic, and, by all means, take time to figure out how valid the criticism is for you, for your product, serving its avatar.
And just remember, some people are just jerks.
Yes.
And I think women are so much worse about this than men are. I think a lot of women, anything that is said to us, we take it to heart. Unless people are complimenting us, and then we think that they're full of it.
It's like they're full of it, yeah.
Right. But, you can have somebody come up to you and say, your product is the worst thing I have ever seen ever.
Yeah, whatever.
Okay, well, what's the name of my product? Well, I don't know, but it's the worst thing I've ever seen ever.
Such a dumb idea.
And we will lose weeks of sleep over that. Women do.
And I'm not saying you're wrong in your analysis. I'm just saying my original advice for this episode was just be like, do I care about you? No. Hit the road. I don't care.
Yeah, see, but I think that that's the difference between men and women.
And I might even be on the extreme side for men too, where I really, unless I see some valid thing I could take out of it, people can call me names. People can say whatever they want to me. I really don't care about their opinion, and this helps make my product better for my avatar, or I heavily respect the person.
But so I think a lot of people, really need to look at whether or not criticism is valid. And if it is valid, then, make improvements, right? Small business is continuous improvement. But if it's not, screw them.
And even if it could be a valid circumstance under other scenarios, for example, this product would not serve this person. Well, that's great. I'm not trying to serve that person. It doesn't matter. If I was trying to serve that person, maybe I would be upset and try and fix it. But if they don't understand what I'm even trying to do and they're offering advice, I appreciate the thought. I'll consider it, but I'm not going to even consider it because it's not relevant to what I'm doing.
Right. And I think we sometimes need to look at our own selves. And, we don't like it when people offer unsolicited advice. And this is something I'm terrible with because I'm a fixer. Okay. But I've checked myself quite a bit. I think I'm better at this than I used to be. We don't like unsolicited advice. Don't give unsolicited advice. And I see this a lot from like people who have gotten out of debt. We believe that like everybody should get out of debt. And we take it upon it. We find it painful when we see people who are in debt. It's painful. And you want to help everybody. You want to get them on a budget and you want to do this and you want to get it now. They might not be there yet.
Yeah.
They might just live your life and be an example in whatever you do, right? Whether it's as a business owner, whether it's as a member of your community, be the example and people will radiate towards you. And sometimes those people will be haters and critics and jerks, but And
let's be honest though, how many times when we take it personally, is it because of what they're saying is hurtful, which helps, but is part of it closely related to one of our own fears? Maybe we have a fear of success. And yes, people have a fear of success. Maybe we have a fear of failure. And there are many reasons why we have fears. And the worst thing that happens with these are those critics trigger your fears. And when that happens, if you overreact and, quit or give up or stop doing it, you're doing a disservice to the people who do follow you. You're doing a disservice to the people who can be helped by your product or service. You can't let their criticism bring your fears out to stop you from helping other people.
Preach it. Hey, look at you go. All right. So I'd love to know if you've had some haters in your business, come check out the Small Biz Life community. Tell us about it. Let's kind of get a dialogue going about how we've dealt with these in the past. And I'd love to know what you think. Go to smallbizlife.com, click on the show notes for this episode, and, leave a comment, because I'd love to know, has this happened to you before? How has it affected you? And, if you're really good at dealing with them, I'd love to know how you do it.
Yeah. And a lot of this, we can help each other in a case-by-case basis, because they get so specific sometimes that I think it's very difficult to broadly generalize a way to deal with all criticism.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. So thank you so much for checking us out this week. If you're not a member of our Facebook group, check out facebook.com/group/smallbizlife. We've got some really exciting things coming in the next couple weeks. And if you're a member of that group, you'll hear about it first. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.
This was Small Biz Life.